Okay, so let us start today's session. Today's session is about variables and theoretical framework. And I hope that today's session will enhance your understanding about the research process. And it is very important to have a very sound understanding of theoretical framework and variables. So it is very important that you take guidance from this session and make you know subsequent changes in your assignment number one, because there are some very important points which we will be discussing in today's session, and which will have a direct consequence on your assignment number one. Okay, so we will be discussing about variables and theoretical framework. The first part of our today's session would be about the theoretical framework. Then we will discuss about the variables, and lastly, we will discuss about construction of the theoretical framework. So, theoretical framework can be defined as a representation of your beliefs on how variables or concepts are related to each other in the form of a model and an explanation on why you believe that these variables are associated to each other through a theory. So, in other words, theoretical framework is basically it summarizes the whole research process. So just by looking at the framework, just by looking at that particular model, you can get a complete understanding about your entire research problem which you are investigating. So when we talk about variable, it is very important to differentiate between variable or concepts. Variable is anything that can take on, uh, you know, differing or varying values. For example, motivation is a variable. The levels of motivation of members to learn in the class or in a work team might take on varying values, ranging from very low to very high. Now, how one measures the level of motivation is an entirely different matter. The factor called motivation has to be reduced from its level of abstraction and operationalized in such a way that it becomes measurable. So, the main difference between variables and concepts is that when concept becomes measurable, it becomes a variable. So basically, the variables and concepts, it is very important for you to distinguish between them. So I will, discuss in detail that how to convert your concepts to variable at the end of this session. Okay, so just by looking at the theoretical framework, like I mentioned that the relationship between variables or concepts are is represented in the form of the model. And just by looking at that model, you can recognize the complete research problem. But one important thing to notice in theoretical framework is that usually theoretical frameworks are constructed when deductive reasoning is used, when quantitative and structured approach to research is used. Most of the times, when using and inductive reasoning or using qualitative research approach, theoretical frameworks are not required. So if you are using qualitative research approaches, you are not required to construct a theoretical framework in your literature review. So the third part of this definition tells us that theoretical framework provides explanation about how variables are related to each other, and usually a theory becomes a foundation to provide this explanation. Now we will discuss theoretical framework in detail in the coming slides. First of all, I need to reiterate this important point, that what is a variable and how variable is different from a concept. Now, see that when we talk about concepts are highly subjective, as and an understanding of them varies from person to person. For instance, beauty is a concept. It is highly subjective. What you consider to be beautiful might not be perceived same by other people. A particular food may be judged excellent by you, but it may be judged awful by another person. So concepts are highly subjective in nature, and we don't want subjective, especially in our quantitative research. Okay, so we when we convert concepts to variables, they are operationalized in measurable terms, so that the extent of variation in respondents' understanding is reduced, if not eliminated. Okay, for instance, gender is a variable. It can be measured in terms of male or female. Age is a variable. It can be measured in terms of years and months. One of the main differences between quantitative and qualitative research is their understanding of variables. In qualitative research, because it usually involves studying perceptions, beliefs, and feelings, you do not make any attempt to establish uniformity in the perceptions or in the beliefs of your respondents. Okay, but in the quantitative studies, the emphasis is on exploring commonalities in the study population. So the uniformity in measurements and variables play an important role. So measurability of variables to ensure uniformity in responses is an important consideration in quantitative structured approaches. So the understanding of variables is very much different in quantitative as well as in qualitative studies. So that is why we discussed right in the beginning of this semester, to have a clear distinction between your research approaches, whether you are going to do a quantitative research or a qualitative research, because both research approaches have a different understanding of variables. Now look at this. This is a theoretical framework. Okay, so theoretical framework is basically a demonstration of the relationship between variables, between concepts in the form of a diagram. So this is a very simple theoretical framework because it has only two concepts. Now this concept, university, now this concept is very vague in nature. Now we are saying that what is the impact of university on student satisfaction? Now, this concept is very vague. How can we convert this vague concept uh, to a measurable, variable? So this theoretical framework is not accurately depicting the required rigor in the representation of theoretical framework, because we are not very clear that how can we measure university. Is it about university ranking? Because it is not mentioned, it is simply a noun. So university is a noun. We need to convert university from a simple term to a measurable concept and see whether it can be measured on whether or whether research instruments are available to measure that concept. So the term university in this very very simple, very very basic theoretical framework can be changed to, for instance, educational quality. Okay, so this is very important part of your research process, that you should be using those concepts which you can measure. Because if you are using you're trying to investigate those concepts which you cannot measure, then this is something which is which will be very problematic for your research. So education quality, whether it is measurable or not, we can simply put a query on Google Scholar, and the queries is in this form: education quality scale. Okay, so we will now get to know that whether education quality has been measured previously by other researchers. If that has been measured previously by other researchers, which shows our research results that it has been measured previously. So we need to include the term scale, because scale usually indicates that the concept has been measured previously. Okay, so we need to add scale with our concept to verify, to authenticate whether our concept has been measured before. Because if we are doing research on those concepts which have not been measured before, then it will be problematic. and I will come on this in my next slide, that why it will be problematic. So it is always good to check to confirm whether the concepts in your research objectives, in your research questions are measurable or not, and whether the research instruments are available for those variables or not. So if you have chosen those concepts which cannot be measured, you still have time to make necessary changes for your assignment number 2, basically, and maybe assignment number 1 as well, because in your assignment number 1 you are defining your research problem, and it is very important that you choose only those research problem and those research objectives, and you identify those research concepts which are measurable. So for your assignment number 1, which is due on 4th October, it is very important to ensure that can you convert your concepts to measurable variables or not. So how to operationalize, it is a very important part of your research. So we have been using the term operationalization again and again, and I think we should define what is meant by operationalization. Operationalization means that your concepts are converted to variables. And when we say that our concepts are converted to variables, we imply that our concepts are measurable. We can measure the concepts. For instance, if you're talking about feminism as a concept, and it is a part of our research problem, we are going to investigate about feminism, then we can use a combination of various queries to find out whether feminism has been operationalized or not. This is the method number 1. So operationalization's first method is to check whether already an existing operationalization is available or not. And the method to do is very simple. For instance, in case of feminism, you can use the combination of these two words, feminism scale. You can use the combination of these words, measurement, feminism measurement, measuring feminism, or attitude towards feminism. So this these combination of words, they can be used for whatever concept which you are focusing upon in your research investigation. So when I use the search function of Google Scholar and use this combination feminism scale, the results were pretty encouraging, that the feminism scale is already available. So feminism has already been operationalized. It has already been measured. So this is a good news, because if some students, if some of the students are working on feminism, I observed during discussion question 3. So it is a good that feminism has already been operationalized. So you can check on how these researchers, they have operationalized the concept of feminism, and you can see for yourself that whether their operationalization adequately meets your requirement, because the way you are trying to study feminism has it fulfills all the requirements of the operationalization which these other researchers have offered. So this is the first method of operationalization. Another method of operationalization is that when existing operationalization of the variables is not available, then you need to create your own operationalization. You need to convert the concepts to variables on the basis of your own knowledge, on the basis of your thorough understanding of the literature. So for instance, if you are focusing upon for instance, you want to measure the concept of richness, and existing operationalization is not available, for instance. So the first step is to identify indicators. Okay, so you need to identify indicators. Indicators are a set of criteria reflective of the concept. So what are the indicators of richness? We have identified 2 indicators: income. So you can tell about a person whether the person is rich or poor by his or her income, or by the value of assets that person owns. So after identifying indicators, and mind you, these indicators are identified after a thorough review of literature. It is not They are not identified randomly. They are identified on the basis of some theoretical grounds, on the basis of certain justification, rationale. Otherwise you cannot choose these indicators randomly. So after choosing identifying indicators, you need to convert them into variables. Income is already a variable because it is measurable, and the value of assets, they might need to be converted. For instance, the location of home at a downtown, closer to commercial locality, it may be valued higher as compared to a home which is owned and located in suburban areas. So you need to convert the value of the assets owned by a person in terms of home, cars, investment, etc. Eliminate subjectivity. This is very important because you are creating your own operationalization. So you should avoid any kind of biasness or subjective elements. For instance, in this case, you can consult globally accepted indicators of income, like per capita income. For instance, you can use to GDP per capita as an indicator. You realize that GDP per capita among rich countries is very high, but in developing countries it is low. So income is again a subjective thing, and a certain level of income may have a different definition of being a rich or a poor, depending upon your geographical location. So looking at per capita income, you come to know that it is close to 50,000 US dollars in America, while it is close to 2,000 US dollars annually in some developing countries in Asia, in Africa. So a person earning an average income in USA may be considered as a rich person in some developing countries in Asia. So, but we want to measure the concept of rich or poor in USA. So we decided that on the basis of existing literature, on the basis of existing justifications and knowledge, that an annual income of $200,000, and if a person is earning more than $200,000 annually, that person would be considered as a rich person. And if the total value of assets is also greater than $200,000, then these two combinations would make a person would be that person would be regarded as a rich person. Now, if you are operationalizing this concept of rich or poor in China, we might get a different definition. We might need to operationalize the same concept differently in China. So that is why even when operationalizations are available, like in this case, when operationalizations are already available in the existing literature, you need to see that which operationalization best fits your purpose, because all the measures are constructed with respect to certain cultural dimensions, some geographical dimensions. So you need to take into consideration that how even when operationalization is already available, you have to choose the best fit with your research problem. Okay. Okay, now we need to discuss the variables. How can we categorize different variables? There are four main types of variables. Dependent variable, which is also known as a criterion variable, independent variable, which is known as a predictor variable, a moderating variable, and lastly, the mediating variable, which is known as an intervening variable. Let us discuss them one by one and try to gain deeper understanding of the role of these variables in your research process. Okay, first of all, the dependent variable is a variable of primary interest to the researcher. So the goal of the research project is to understand, predict, and explain the variability in your dependent variable. So the focus of your research project is on dependent variable. So DV is the main variable that lends itself for investigation. And through the analysis of the dependent variable, it is possible to find answers or solutions to the problem. So many students ask whether they can have more than one dependent variable. Yes, it is possible to have more than one dependent variable in a study. Uh, for instance, in this example, there is only one dependent variable. The example is that if the service quality is low, then consumers will adopt a switching behavior. Consumers will like to shift from that brand. For instance, if it is the case with some restaurant and you are not satisfied, you are not completely happy with the quality of this provided in that restaurant, then you are likely to switch from that restaurant. So it means that in this particular situation, the bad service quality or the low service quality is acting as an independent variable, and the consumer switching behavior, it is dependent upon uh, the quality of the service. So if the quality of the service is poor, consumers will switch to another restaurant. If the quality of the service is not poor, it is good, it is up to optimum standards, then consumers will not be switching to the other restaurants. So this also shows that a change in the dependent variable should be associated with a change in the independent variable. So independent variable should precede the dependent variable. In other words, there must be a time sequence in which the two occur. The cause must occur before the effect. So it means that first of all, the service quality needs to be bad. Okay, then consumers will switch. So it means that independent variable occur before the dependent variable. So there should be always a precedence. In this case, IV will always come before the dependent variable. Okay, another important thing. Uh, no other factor should be a possible cause of the change in the dependent variable if your theoretical framework includes only these two variables. Okay. For instance, if as a result of your statistical analysis, you calculated that low service quality, bad service quality is causing 20% variation in consumer switching behavior. In switching behavior. So it means that 20% of variation in customer switching behavior is explained by low service quality. What about the remaining 80%? How is that remaining 80% of switching behavior of consumers being explained? Now, this remaining 80% behavior is not within the scope of our research, because our research is focusing only on two variables, that is bad service quality and customer switching. If service quality is bad, then customers will switch. If service quality is not perceived as bad, consumers will not switch. So we believe that after analysis, after a statistical analysis, after collecting data from the consumers, we come to realize that we estimated that 20% of variation in consumer switching behavior is caused by service quality. But there are more factors which are contributing to the consumer switching. There may be 5 or 6 or 10 or 20 other factors which are contributing towards that 80% unexplained variation in customer switching. So as a researcher, it is really not your responsibility to explain 100% variation in the dependent variable. Okay. Okay, because there is a lot of research occurring, and there are the researchers as well. They are also doing research. So you can focus on the main variables. What are the main variables which are causing customer to switch from one restaurant to another restaurant? So service quality is a very important variable. It may it may contribute to 20% variation in consumer switching. It is a good explanation that a single variable is explaining this much variation in the switching behavior. And what about the other 80% variation? That is not part of our research. It means that we are controlling for other factors. For instance, customers may be switching to another restaurant because they have got a loyalty card. There is a loyalty card, there is a discount card. A new restaurant has opened in the community, in the same locality. So you're trying that because that restaurant is offering discounts. So you're not switching because of bad service quality. You're switching for another reason. So these other reasons, we need to control them. They will not be part of our research if those factors are not accounted in. If those factors are not accounted for in our theoretical framework. If these customer switching and service quality, they are part of your research objective and your research questions. So that is why they are part of your theoretical framework. But these other 80% variations which are explained by multiple factors, they are not part of our research. So we need to control those unexplained variations. So it should not be a problem. We should only focus on those variables which are part of our research objectives and our research questions, and consequently part of our theoretical framework. Next, we should also develop logical explanations in relationship between our variables. Now, in the relationship between IV and DV, service quality and customer switching, how can we explain the relationship? Now, in this case, the theory of planned behavior can explain the logical relationship. Theory of planned behavior postulates that consumer behavior and their emotions and cognitions, they must be consistent with each other. So if consumers are not satisfied with the service quality, their emotions are very unpleasant, their cognitions, they have a negative attitude, so they shall not go out to consume food in that restaurant again. So their behavior, their cognitions and the emotions are consistent to each other. So this behavior, this relationship between IV and DV is very well explained by theory of planned behavior. So this is another requirement. So whenever you are trying to establish a relationship between an IV and a DV, you must have a sound theoretical justification to explain that relationship. Okay, some examples. For instance, research in behavioral finance has shown that overconfidence can cause investors to underreact to new information. So in this particular situation, if we can identify what is the dependent variable and the IV, in this case, overconfidence is the IV because it is causing investors to underreact to new information. So it is pretty much clear just by reading the situation, just by just by understanding the dynamics that are affecting a given situation, we can clearly identify the IVs and the DVs. In the second situation, a marketing manager believes that limiting the availability of a product increases product desirability. Now, this is a concept, limiting the availability of the product. So when we convert this concept into a measurable variable, it will become, I think, product scarcity. That is a more scholarly term. It will become a product scarcity. So product scarcity will increase product desirability. So product scarcity is an independent variable and product desirability is a dependent variable in this case. Okay, so these are some examples which can help you clearly understand the distinction between IVs and DVs. Okay, so moderating variable, again this is a very important variable, moderating variable. So it is a variable that affects the direction and or strength of relationship between IVs and DV. So basically, when we talk about moderating variable, the presence of a moderating variable modifies the original relationship between the independent and dependent variables. So there is a simple rule of thumb in order to identify moderating variable, and this rule of thumb is I always suggest students to use this simple formula to identify the moderating variable. For instance, ask yourself a question like the case in this slide. Does relationship between bad service quality and consumer switching behavior will always happen, will always occur? In other words, will all consumers will all consumers switch to other restaurants if service quality is poor? Okay. Now, the key word here is all the consumers. The key word here is all the situations. So here you need to ask yourself a simple question that will all the consumers switch to another restaurant? Service quality in is poor in the current restaurant. So if you're asking yourself this question, if the answer is yes, if the answer is yes, that it will happen every time, all the consumers will switch to another restaurant if service quality is poor, then it means that there is no requirement of a moderating variable in this particular situation. Okay, but you know that this is not the case. It does not happen always that if the service quality is bad, consumers will switch. It does not happen always. Why? Just look at your own example. Sometimes you often complain about the food in your cafeteria. The food in your cafeteria is not up to standard. The service quality is not very good. The taste of the food is not good. But you don't consider switching from student cafeteria to other restaurants. Why? The reason is the switching cost, because you need to take lectures, you need to take you need to attend your classes, and switching cost can be defined as the cost that consumers spend in terms of time, in terms of effort, in terms of inconvenience, in order to switch to another choice, in order to choose an alternative. So for instance, you might need to spend extra time if you want to eat outside your cafeteria. If you're not choosing your student cafeteria, if you're choosing some restaurant, it means that you need to spend more time. You need to spend more time, and this time will be taken from your studies, from your education, and your cafeteria times are designed in such a way that they do not conflict with your classes. So it means that if you are not choosing your own student cafeteria, you are choosing restaurants, then you have to pay certain switching cost in terms of effort. You might have to put more effort. The cafeteria is within the premises of university, restaurant is not in the premises of university. You might need to spend more. Cafeteria is relatively inexpensive, but restaurants are more expensive in nature. So the switching cost, what additional cost you as a consumer have to pay in terms of money, in terms of effort, in terms of convenience, this all constitutes switching cost. Now, if switching costs are high, this means that uh, even when service quality is bad, still you will not switch. Still you will start. You will continue consuming food in the same place. Why? Because the switching costs are pretty high. You will keep on compromising. But if switching costs are low, the additional cost you have to pay in terms of money, in terms of time, in terms of effort, if it is not much, then low service quality is more likely to make consumers switch to other restaurants. So the relationship between low service quality and customer switching is contingent upon the switching cost. It is dependent upon the switching cost. If switching cost is high, then this relationship will be weakened. Low service quality will not always lead to customer switching. Okay, if this switching cost is low, then this relationship will be more strengthened. Low service quality is more likely to cause customer switching. So you have to take into consideration this very important distinction for moderating variable, that moderating variable basically it modifies the original relationship between an IV and a DV. So the original relationship between a dependent variable and independent variable is contingent upon the moderating variable. Okay, so this is a very important distinction that you have to make while labeling your variables. Okay, further explanation how you can differentiate between your moderating and independent variables. Sometimes it becomes confusion is likely to arise as to when a variable is to be treated as an independent variable and when it becomes a moderating variable. So you need to take into consideration how variables are affecting one another and the dynamics operating in a given situation. You need to take into consideration both these important points, that how variables are affecting one another. For instance, in the first situation here, a research study indicates that better the quality of the training program in an organization and the greater the growth needs of the employees, the greater will be the willingness of the employees to learn new things. Now we have identified three important concepts here: quality of the training programs, the growth needs of the employees, and the willingness of the employees to learn new things, new ways of doing things. Okay, in this particular situation, uh, the training programs, the quality of the training programs is an independent variable. Moreover, the growth need of the employees, again, this is an independent variable. So there are two independent variables in this particular situation. And the willingness of the employers to learn new ways of doing things is a dependent variable. So in the first situation, we have two IVs and we have one dependent variable. Okay, now if we read the second situation state that the willingness of the employers to learn new ways of doing things is not influenced by the quality of the training program, and it does not apply to all people. Only those people who have high growth needs seem to have the desire to learn to do new things. Okay, in the second situation, the quality of the training program is still retained as an independent variable. So the quality of the training program in the second situation is still independent variable. The willingness of the employees to learn new things. Again, this variable is retained as a dependent variable. In the first situation, this was a DV, and in the second situation, it is again a DV. In the first situation, quality of the training program was an IV, and in the second situation, quality of the training program is again an IV. Okay, now in this particular situation, in the second situation, they state that the relationship between the quality of the training program and willingness of the employees to learn new things is contingent upon the growth needs of the employees. If the employees have high growth needs, the relationship between training programs and the willingness of the employees to learn new ways of doing things will be strengthened. But if employees have low growth needs, this relationship between quality of the training program and the willingness of the employees to learn new things will be weakened. So this variable, high growth needs, is modifying the original relationship between IV and DV. And the original relationship between IV and DV is contingent upon this particular variable, which is growth needs. So this variable is your moderating variable. I hope this example further clarifies that the difference between these variables. Another example. So a manager of an insurance company finds that fear appeals in commercials are positively associated with consumers' behavioral intentions to insure. This effect is particularly strong for people with a high level of anxiety. So we have identified there are three important concepts in this situation: fear appeals, intention to ensure, and level of anxiety. Okay, so according to this situation, fear appeals, used in commercials, influence people's intention to ensure. This makes fear appeal as an independent variable, and consumers' intention to ensure as a dependent variable. And this is reflected here as well. So fear appeals will make consumers to purchase insurance. It will increase their their propensity to purchase insurance. But this relationship between fear appeals and intentions to insure is particularly stronger among those consumers who have high levels of anxiety, meaning thereby that those consumers who have low levels of anxiety will not get influenced by the use of fear appeals in the advertisements, and consequently they won't buy insurance. So the relationship between IV and DV is contingent upon this particular variable, anxiety levels. Okay, so that is why this particular variable is your moderating variable, and this is how we depict moderating variable as well. So the arrow from moderating variable is falling on the arrow which is going from IV to DV. So you need to learn the accurate depiction of the relationship, how to show the relationship as well. Okay, the last variable, mediating variable. Now, when we talk about mediating variable, it has two very important characteristics. The most important characteristic of a mediating variable is its time dimension. It has a temporal quality. So a mediating variable is the one that surfaces between the time the independent variables start operating, the time independent variables start operating to influence the dependent variable, and the time their impact is felt on it. Okay, so mediating variable, it surfaces, it emerges between the time period when IV starts operating and the impact of IV is felt on DV. So between these two time periods, mediating variable emerges. Okay, so this is the first most important characteristic of mediating variable. The second very important characteristic of mediating variable is that it explains the relationship between IV and DV. So I suggest to students a very simple formula to identify mediating variable. For instance, if your independent variable is talking on phone while driving, okay, and your dependent variable is road accident, okay, so now you are investigating that talking on phone while driving is likely to cause road accidents. Okay, so this is your research problem, and you are predicting that talking on phone while driving is likely to cause more road accidents than vice versa. So how can you identify mediating variable in this situation? Ask yourself a simple question: that why talking on phone while driving is likely to cause road accidents. Just ask yourself this question: that why do you think that if you are talking on phone while driving, you are likely to get hit by another car, or you're likely to get in the road accident? Why? The answer will be your mediating variable. Now, if you ask this question, that why if I'm talking on phone while driving may cause road accident, the answer could be very simple. Is it because of attention diversion, right? It may be because of the attention diversion. So attention diversion is the reason that you're talking on phone while driving may cause road accident, and attention diversion is the mediating variable in this situation, because talking on phone while driving disrupts your attention, which consequently may leads to a road accident. So this is the second most important dimension of mediating variable. You need to, uh, if you want to identify, if you are confused about mediating variable, you need to see both of these dimensions are being, both of these conditions are being fulfilled or not. Okay, so we will discuss some examples. Like this example, which we were discussing in the case of IV and DV, and in the case of moderating variable as well, that service quality, low service quality may leads towards consumer switching. Now, just see how both of the situations, how both of the conditions which we discussed about the mediating variable are being applied in this particular situation. Now, just take the second condition first. For instance, why do you think that low service quality is making consumers switch from that restaurant? Okay, so we ask ourselves the same question. The why low service quality leads to consumer switching. The answer would be the mediating variable. So the answer could be that because consumers are unhappy with the level of service provided to them, and they are hence dissatisfied. Okay, so consumer dissatisfaction is the mediating variable in this particular situation. Now, also note, our first condition was the temporal quality of mediating variable. Now, consumer dissatisfaction is also the variable which surfaced when bad service quality had already surfaced. Okay, so bad service has already happened. So the next in line would be, and after consumer dissatisfaction, consumers will think about switching. So again, the temporal quality of mediating variable is also being satisfied, and the explanational quality of mediating variable is also being satisfied here. So you need to ask yourself whether both of the conditions which we discussed in this particular scenario are being fulfilled in the case of mediating variable or not. Okay. Let us take a case where we can position all the variables together, okay, in the form of theoretical framework. So this is a particular case which talks about avatars. Avatars are virtual characters that can be used as representatives of a company. Now this is a keyword, virtual characters. Now, they can be used as a representative of a company that is using the internet as a distribution channel. So, avatars can be used as shopping assistants, website guides, or as identification figures. So, these first, few lines, they are about the, description of the avatars. Now, the manager of an online company believes that avatar mediated communication will have a positive effect on satisfaction and which will affect on the purchase intention of the consumers. Okay, so because avatars enhance the value of information provided to the website and increase the pleasure of the shopping experiences, she perceived that there would be a positive effect on the perceived information value on satisfaction, especially among those consumers who are highly involved. Okay, so the four important concepts which we can identify from this particular situation are avatar mediated communication, consumer satisfaction, purchase intention, and consumers level of involvement. Okay, now if we go through our uh, the distinctions between our variables, we can recall that independent variable, it helps to explain the variance in the dependent variable. Okay, the mediating variable, it surfaces between the time when IV starts impacting on DV and the time when that impact is felt on DV. And also mediating variable, the second condition is that it explains why relationship could exist between an IV and a DV. And similarly, moderating variable, we learned that it has a contingent effect on the relationship between two variables. So moderating variable has the capacity to modify the original relationship between IV and DV. Now, in this case, from our the presentation of the ideas in this particular paragraph, it is clear that avatar mediated communication is an independent variable, and if consumers are satisfied with the mediated communication, they will go for purchasing it. So it means that consumer satisfaction is not towards the product. That satisfaction is directed towards the communication. If they have a positive experience with the communication, then they are likely to buy the products which are being offered. So it means that the consumer satisfaction is a mediating variable here. Now let us check how it is a mediating variable. Okay. So we check its mediation by first condition, that how about the temporal quality. So avatar mediated communication occurs at time t1. Purchase intentions occur at time t3, and consumer satisfaction with the communication, how happy consumers are while shopping, how excited, and what kind of experiences they have. If they have pleasant experiences, it means that they are more likely to purchase. So this is more likely to emerge between time 1 and time 3. So it is the first condition. It is a which is met by this variable. Secondly, does it explain the relationship between IV and DV? Because purchase intention is identified as a DV here. Now we see that avatar mediated communications make people purchase. Why? Why avatar mediated communications enhance the purchase intention of consumers? Why? Because consumers they enjoy the mediated communication. They are extremely satisfied with the mediated communication. It enhances their shopping experiences. That is why they go for purchase. So it means that this variable is again explaining the relationship between IV and DV. So that is why it is a mediating. We have correctly identified it as a mediating variable. Now, next, this situation also described that not all consumers who are satisfied with the avatar mediated communication will go for purchase. Only those consumers who are who have high involvement in that product category. Okay, now there are different types of involvement. It can be communication involvement, it can be purchase involvement, it can be product involvement, but they have not mentioned here. So just for for the sake of it, I'm taking consumer involvement as a product involvement here. So if consumers have high involvement in that product category, which is being sold in that distribution channel, then consumers will go for purchasing it. If consumers are not involved in that product category, then this relationship will just stop right here. There is an avatar mediated communication, and consumers will be satisfied with that communication. That's it. They are lesser likely to go for purchase. So they are only likely to go for purchase when they are involved in that product. Even if they are satisfied with the communication, if they have a very pleasant experience of shopping in the online environment, still they won't purchase it. They will only purchase when they are highly involved in that product. Now again, there is a important question here, that why this moderator is between mediating variable and dependent variable. Why it is not between the these two variables, IV and the mediating? Why it is not here? Okay, why it is between mediating and DV? It is first of all we need to understand the difference here, that when the contingent effect of moderator is between independent variable and mediating variable, we call it first degree moderation. Okay, so if moderator is between these two variables, is between IV and mediator, then this would be first degree moderation. But if contingent effect is between mediating variable and dependent variable, then we call it as a second degree moderation. So in this particular scenario, there is a second degree moderation. Okay, there is a second degree moderation because it is clearly mentioned that even when consumers are enjoying the avatar mediated communication, they will only go for purchase when they are highly involved in that product category. So the relationship between mediating and dependent variable is contingent upon consumer involvement. Okay, so this is how you can position your variables in a theoretical framework, and you need to be careful about first degree moderation and the second degree moderation, and this will be derived directly from the situation, and in this particular situation they are implying that it is a second degree moderation. Okay, so now our first part of our lecture is over. Now I will discuss with you how to construct a theoretical framework, but before discussing this, I want to stop here and ask if you have any questions. Any questions, any ambiguities, any concept which needs further elaboration, please let me know. Any questions, any queries, any ambiguities? Okay, so I will carry on. I will continue with the discussion. How to construct theoretical framework. So the first step in constructing your theoretical framework is to convert your research questions or your research objectives to identifiable concepts. So I will take forward the same example which we discussed in our last session. It was about student consumerism. So we have four research objectives. Let us read all the research objectives one by one and try to identify the concepts here. So the first research objective is about find out the effect of student consumerism on students' academic entitlement. For your understanding, student consumerism is the tendency of students to perceive education as a commodity. And academic entitlement, it has been described as students' expectations of high grades for modest effort and demanding attitude towards teacher irrespective of their efforts in the class. So these are the two important concepts which are identified from the first research objective. In the second research objective, we are trying to find out the effect of academic entitlement on the learning styles. And in the third, we are trying to find out the relationship between consumerism and the learning styles. And in the fourth research objective, we are trying to find out whether the relationship between academic entitlement and student consumerism holds true for all the students or for only those students who are academically more or less engaged. So it means that the relationship between academic entitlement and consumerism is contingent upon the academic engagement. So we will convert our research objectives and our research questions to identifiable concepts. The four identifiable concepts which we have identified, which we have conferred from our research questions are student consumerism, academic engagement, learning styles, and academic entitlement. So all these four concepts are identified from our research objectives or research questions. So only these four concepts are discussed here. No other concept is discussed here. So first step is to convert your research objectives or your research questions to identifiable concepts. So we have identified four concepts here. Now the second step is very, very important. So you need to ensure that the concepts which you have identified from your research objectives, or your research questions, they are measurable. Okay, if they are not measurable, if these concepts cannot be converted to variables, you need to consider operationalizing it by yourself, or you may choose other variables, other concepts which can be measured. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is you need to check all the concepts one by one, that whether these concepts are measurable or not. So consumerism is a concept which is usually used in marketing studies. So we search for consumerism scale separately from students. So we the search term which we use is consumerism scale, and then we use the capital and then we use students. Okay, so because we want to check that whether consumerism scale has been adopted to student population to measure their attitude towards education as a commodity. So there is a research paper which has made an effort to measure student consumerism. So we can read this paper and see whether their conceptualization, whether their operationalization of student consumerism is adequate enough, and whether it can help us investigate our own research problem or not. So this is our first concept. So just remember the formulas and the functions which we are using, so it can help you acknowledge as well that whether your concepts are measurable or not. Similarly, we will do the same with other concepts which we have identified. So similar process will be done for them. Now, because academic entitlement is a more education related variable, we can search for its measurability straight away by typing in inverted commas academic entitlement scale. Okay. So as we see that this concept has been adequately operationalized as well, we need to read these articles to confirm that which operationalization best fits our purpose, as it is evident that there are more than one ways to measure the concept of academic entitlement. So we can check these measurements, we can read these articles and choose the most suitable, most appropriate measurement for us. Similarly, we will do the same with our third concept. Academic engagement was our third concept. We will include the term scale with it, and we will check that whether academic engagement is operationalized or not, and how, if it is operationalized, how it is operationalized, how it is measured, and we will choose the most appropriate measurement and operationalization of this concept. Lastly, we will do with our the last concept which was identified from our research question, student learning styles scale. So we use the same concept which was identified, and we added the combination of scale with it, and we search with inverted commas on Google Scholar. So we see that there are more than one conceptualizations, there are more than one operationalization of this concept as well. So if you have more than one operationalization to measure a concept, you can select the best operationalization on the basis of your research problem. Ask yourself the question, which operationalization best fits your purpose. Moreover, the number of citations and the level of the journal, if the journal where that article is published, if that journal is prestigious, from where you are borrowing your operationalization, it is also very important. So the quality of the publication is also very important. So in our research, all concepts are measurable. So we identified four concepts. All the four concepts are measurable. And if any of these concepts were not measurable and there were no ready operationalization of the concepts which we selected for our research study, then either we needed to develop and create our own operationalization. Now, creating own operationalization, as I mentioned in the beginning of this lecture, it is a difficult process because you need to have a thorough understanding. And if you are up for that challenge, go for it. But if you're not up for that challenge, then you need to change your concepts. You need to change. You need to choose only those concepts which have been measured before. If that concept is not measurable, then it means that it will be difficult for you to operationalize it. And but if it is not operationalized before and you are ready for the challenge, you want to operationalize it yourself, then you need to have a thorough understanding of the literature. Then you can take up the challenge and you can create your own operationalization. So all students, they need to go through their research problems and their research objectives and their research questions to evaluate whether their concepts are measurable or not. And if your concepts are not measurable, then you should have a clear idea that how you want to operationalize it. And if you don't have a clear idea of operationalization, then please change your concepts and choose only measurable concepts, which are variables. This holds especially true if your study is quantitative in nature. Okay, the third step in constructing a theoretical framework is labeling your variables. Okay, so let me go back to the research objectives because it will also help us in labeling our variables. Okay, see, in our first research objective, student consumerism is acting as an IV and student academic entitlement is acting as a DV. Okay, in our second research objective, we want to find out the effect of academic entitlement on learning styles. Now, academic entitlement in our second research objective is, functioning as an IV, and the learning style, they are working as a DV in our second objective. In our third research objective, student consumerism is again working as a IV, and learning styles, they are working as a DV. Now, if you see that student consumerism, it has remained consistently independent variable. It appeared in research objective 1, it appeared in research objective 3, and in both these instances, it has consistently remained independent variable. So independent variables, label has not changed in any of the research objectives. Okay. Similarly, for learning styles, learning styles has remained, dependent variable in the research objective 2, and again in the research objective 3, it has, continued to remain as a dependent variable. So it is very clear that whenever student consumerism has appeared in our research objectives, it has consistently remained as an IV. And whenever learning styles has appeared in our research objectives, it has consistently remained as a DV. But student academic entitlement, in the first research objective, it was functioning as a DV. But in the second research objective, it was functioning as an IV. Now, this is the third main condition, third main characteristic of a mediating variable, that it can function as a dependent variable as well as an independent variable in the same research problem. In the first research objective, academic entitlement is a DV because you are trying to find out the effect of consumerism on academic entitlement. In the second research objective, academic entitlement is IV because you want to find out the effect of academic entitlement on the learning styles. So it means that this is the third important condition of mediating variable, that mediating variable can function as an independent variable and as well as a dependent variable in the same research process, in the same research investigation. So that is why this is the third important characteristic of a mediating variable, and that is why it is academic entitlement is a mediating variable in our research problem. And academic engagement, because the relationship between consumerism and academic entitlement is contingent upon the academic engagement of the students. So it is a moderating variable. Now, the the third step is label your variables. We have labeled our variables, and we have seen that the independent variable, it remain consistent. It will never change its position. It will remain consistent in all the research objectives. It will continue to appear as an IV. Dependent variable, it will again continue to appear as a DV in all the research objectives. But mediating variable, it can change its role. It will change its role as an IV, and it will also change its role as a DV. So again, such role, transformations will be usually attributed towards to mediating variable. And because academic engagement appeared as a contingent effect, so it will be a moderating variable. So we have now labeled our variables. The step 4 is to position our variables in the form of theoretical framework. Now, we wanted to find out the relationship between consumerism and academic entitlement. This was our research objective 1. Our research objective 2 was, the relationship between academic entitlement and learning styles. Our third research objective was consumerism, effect of consumerism on learning style. This was our research objective 3. And our fourth research objective was to see the contingent effect of engagement on the relationship between consumerism and entitlement. So this was our research objective. Again, our research objectives are going a long way in defining our variables, in labeling our variables, and in constructing our theoretical framework. So that is why it is very important that you're very crystal clear about your research objectives and your research questions. The fifth step of constructing your theoretical framework is to explain the logical association between variables through theory. So, your theoretical framework, it is not just a random combination of variables. You need to make a sound a theoretical argument on why such relationship exists. Okay, so theoretical framework is a logically developed, described, and elaborated network of associations among the variables considered relevant in your research problem. So that is why the importance of doing a thorough literature review becomes very clear now, because the step 5 of theoretical framework represents and elaborates the relationship among the variables, explains the theory underlying these relations, and describes the nature and direction of these relationships. For instance, student consumerism might have a positive relationship with academic entitlement. Why there is a positive relationship? Now you need to make an argument. You need to make a series of arguments. You need to state a theory that on which foundation, on which basis you are stating that their relationship will be positive. Now this is what constitutes the most important part of your literature review. So in other words, the logical association between variables through theory is the most significant part of your literature review. And this is what your assignment number 2 is all about. Your assignment number 2 is due by end of next month, maybe. So you need to be very careful. And I will also discuss how you can revisit your literature review last week's lecture in view of the current lecture. The step 6 is constructing hypotheses. We will discuss this in our next session. Now we need to revisit the concepts which we studied in our last session, and we will link them with our current session, today's lecture. So in last week's lecture, we discussed about how to write literature review. Now we need to discuss how you can sequentialize, how you can make format your literature review, how to properly organize your literature review. So the variables considered relevant to the study should be clearly defined in your literature review. It is not always easy to come up with generally agreed upon definitions of the relevant variables. Still, well-chosen definitions of variables are needed, because they help you to provide an explanation for the relationship between the variables in your model, and these definitions will serve as a basis for the operationalization and measurement of your variables as well. And the discussion and arguments presented in literature review should clearly point towards the proposed relationship that are postulated in your theoretical framework. For instance, this is a theoretical framework, and this should be the outcome of your literature review. Okay, so all the discussions in your literature review should point towards the construction of your theoretical framework. So this, a theoretical framework, whatever your theoretical framework is, it should be the outcome of the arguments or the discussions you have made in your literature review. Okay. So you should not consider this simply a theoretical framework as a diagram. This is a model which you have developed on the basis of theory, which you have developed on the basis of arguments. So this model describes your ideas about how the concept, how the variables in your model are related to each other. So this diagram, this model, it will help the readers to visualize the theorized relationship between the variables in your model, and it will help them to obtain a quick idea about how you think about the research problem. So you will see that after today's lecture, if you're able to get good understanding of today's lecture, you will be able to just go through the theoretical framework in different research articles, and you will see that you have gained a complete understanding, or at least an adequate level of understanding among variables in that session. Okay. So literature review should be, it should point towards your theoretical framework. This is the nutshell, that the relationship between literature review and theoretical framework in a nutshell is this: that literature review should point towards your theoretical framework. So it should provide clear explanation for the relationships that you have postulated in your theoretical framework. That's it. So I will give you a complete format of your assignment number 2, and I hope that you have gained a better understanding of literature review after today's lecture. Okay, so now if you have any questions, any queries about today's session. Okay, any question, any query, anything which is not clear, you can ask. Okay. Okay, so let me explain the discussion question 4. It is a very simple situation. You need to read the situation, you need to get an understanding of the situation, and after reading this situation, you need to identify variables and also give your reasons. Like I have given some formulas, some shortcuts, some very categorical explanation of how why you should label variables as independent, dependent, moderating, or mediating. You should be doing the same when you identify these variables as these. First, this is the first part. The second part is, do you think that the quantitative research is the most suitable approach to study the above situation? Now, this situation, do you think that the quantitative approach is the best suitable approach to study this situation? Or do you think that you can use qualitative approach as well? You need to give arguments. Whatever answer you choose, if you believe quantitative is good enough, give your arguments. If you believe qualitative is good enough, give your arguments. And then you need to evaluate the answers of 3 more students. Now, keeping in view the national holiday, I think, and also the deadline of your assignment number 1, I have made some modifications in the deadline. So the deadline of the first response is Sunday, 4th October. So the deadline of the first response is Sunday, 4th October, and the deadline of the evaluating the answers of 3 more students, it should be Tuesday, 6th October. Okay, so you have a complete week, so you can enjoy your vacations, so you can take benefit of these extended deadlines. Okay, so this is the extended deadline. Deadline for the first response is 4th October, and deadline for the evaluation of three more students is 6th October. Secondly, your assignment number one is approaching. The structure of assignment number one is I have already shared with you through an announcement. The assignment number one constitutes these six parts. Please follow this pattern and please check that your concepts are measurable or not. Okay, and because if your concepts are not measurable, then maybe you need to make some modifications in your research objectives, your research problem, your research questions. Firstly. Secondly, you need to also take advice from the feedback that is provided to you by your class fellows or by me. You can further improve your assignment number one. Please keep the word limit between these 7 to 800 words, and this is inclusive of references. The references should not be more than 3 and minimum of 1 references, and please follow these formatting guidelines. And the deadline is 4th October midnight. Any question about the assignment or the discussion question? Any question? Okay, I think you're very happy that you're going on vacations. So thank you very much for your time. I wish you good luck for your vacations. I hope that you enjoy your time, spend time with your family, your friends. Uh, Bye bye. Have happy vacations. And if you find any issue in any concept, please feel free to discuss with me. Thank you for your time. Bye bye. Have good vacations. Bye bye.